June 30th, 1957, 9:47 p.m. A 24-year-old man died in a hospital bed in Modena. His father wasn't there. The funeral was 3 days later. Hundreds attended. His father didn't come. For the next 31 years, until the day he died, Enzo Ferrari never spoke his son's name in public, never acknowledged the funeral he skipped, never explained the absence. But he built monuments: an engine named Dino, a car called Dino 206 GT. Everyone thought it was tribute. It was something darker. Enzo Ferrari didn't lose his son once. He lost him twice. Once to death, once to silence. This is the story of how that double loss defined everything that came after. Alfredo Ferrari, everyone called him Dino, was born in 1932. Enzo's only son, the heir, the one who would continue what Enzo built. From childhood, Dino was different from his father, gentle where Enzo was hard, thoughtful where Enzo was blunt. But they shared one obsession: engines. Dino studied engineering at university, spent weekends at Maranello, asked questions that impressed senior engineers who'd worked there for decades. By his early 20s, Dino was designing engine components, working on V6 configurations, contributing real ideas to real projects. Ferrari saw what he'd always hoped for: someone who understood, someone who could continue after he was gone. In 1955, Dino graduated, joined Ferrari officially, started working on a new V6 engine. Father and son argued constantly about technical details, about approaches, about everything. But underneath the arguments was something rare for Ferrari: belief that Ferrari wouldn't die with him. That belief lasted 1 year. Early 1956. Dino started feeling weak, trouble walking, muscle fatigue, tests, specialists, more tests. March 1956. Duchenne muscular dystrophy, progressive, degenerative, terminal. Patients rarely lived past 25. Dino was 24. Ferrari refused the diagnosis, demanded better doctors. They came, said the same thing, demanded experimental treatments. They tried. Nothing worked. Demanded solutions that didn't exist yet. There were none. By summer, Dino needed a wheelchair. By fall, he needed help with everything. By winter, he was mostly in bed. Ferrari visited every evening, talked about the factory, about engine designs, about plans, as if there would be time for plans. Dino went along with it, for a while. Then, one night in December, Dino said, "We need to talk about what happens after." Ferrari stood up. "You're getting better." "Papa, the doctors are wrong. You're young, strong. You're getting better." Dino didn't argue, just looked at his father with an expression people later described as sad understanding. Ferrari left, didn't return that night. The next 6 months were a performance both men agreed to without discussing. Ferrari performing certainty, Dino accepting it. Both knew the truth. Neither said it aloud. Because what do you say when someone you love is dying and won't admit it? You let them pretend. Because the pretending is easier than the conversation. In May 1957, Dino asked to see the V6 blueprints one last time. Ferrari brought them to the hospital, spread them across the bed. They worked for 3 hours. Dino's hands barely functioned, but his mind still did. He suggested modifications that later proved correct. Ferrari wrote down everything. When they finished, Dino looked at the design and said it would work. Ferrari agreed. Then Dino said something that would haunt Ferrari for 31 years. According to those present, he asked his father to promise 2 things: finish the engine and keep building after he was gone. What exactly was said has been debated, but witnesses agree Ferrari's voice broke when he said, "I promise." It was the last time they worked together. June 30th, 1957. Evening. Dino's breathing changed, shallow, irregular. Laura, Dino's mother, was there. A priest, nurses. Dino asked for his father. Laura called the factory. "He needs to come, now." Ferrari's assistant knocked on his office door. "The hospital called. Dino's asking for you." No response. Enzo, you need to go. The door stayed locked. At 9:47 p.m., Dino died. Laura held his hand. The priest gave last rites. Nurses recorded the time. Enzo Ferrari was 3 kilometers away, behind a locked door. When the hospital called to inform him, Ferrari answered, listened, said, "I understand," then hung up. He sat in his office until dawn, alone, lights off. Next morning, 6 a.m., he arrived at the factory, worked a full day, said nothing about Dino. People didn't know if he knew. Then word spread, and they watched him work as if the world hadn't ended. July 3rd, 1957. Dino's funeral. The church overflowed. Factory workers, engineers, university friends, family. Laura sat in the front row. The seat beside her stayed empty. People whispered, "Where is he?" No one knew. The priest spoke about Dino's brilliance, his kindness, his promise cut short. Laura cried quietly. Others wept. But the absence everyone felt wasn't Dino's, it was Enzo's. After the service, people approached Laura carefully. "Where is Enzo?" "At the factory," she said. Voice flat. "Is he coming later?" "No." "But he's not coming," Laura said. "Not today, not ever. That's who he is." Ferrari spent the funeral working on the V6 engine, Dino's design, the promise he kept while breaking the one that mattered. For 31 years, Ferrari never spoke Dino's name in public. Journalists asked. He said nothing. Employees mentioned Dino. He changed subjects. Even Laura learned not to bring him up. Once, years later, she asked, "Why won't you talk about him?" Ferrari was quiet for a long time. Then, "Because saying his name out loud makes it real, and I'm not ready for it to be real." "But it is real. He's gone." "To you," Ferrari said, "not to me." But the silence wasn't emptiness, it was weight. Ferrari built monuments everywhere, just never explained them. 1957. The V6 engine Dino designed was completed, named Dino V6. 1968, a new car. Dino 206 GT, 1970s, a factory building. Dino Wing. People saw tribute. Those close to Ferrari saw something else. One longtime engineer said years later, "Those weren't memorials. They were apologies. Apologies for not being there when Dino died, for not going to the funeral, for not being the father he needed. Ferrari couldn't say sorry, so he built it." Laura lived with the silence for decades. She told a friend once, "I lost my son to illness. Enzo lost him twice, to death, and to his refusal to grieve. I don't know which hurt him more." Ferrari's engineers saw changes after 1957, colder, more distant, more obsessed with work. "He disappeared into the factory," one said, like if he worked hard enough, long enough, he could outrun what happened. But you can't outrun grief. You can only bury it, and buried grief builds pressure. Every pattern we've seen in this series, the funerals Ferrari didn't attend, the hospitals he avoided, the losses he wouldn't acknowledge, they all traced back to one night, June 30, 1957, 9:47 p.m. The night Ferrari learned control was illusion, that trying wasn't enough, that being Ferrari, with all the money, all the genius, all the power, couldn't save the one person who mattered most. So he chose silence, because acknowledging death meant remembering the one death he caused by absence. August 14th, 1988. Ferrari was dying, 90 years old, kidney failure, hospital in Modena. In his final hours, someone asked if he had regrets. Long silence. Then, according to those present, Ferrari said, "I should have been there." Where? When he died, I was afraid if I was there it would be real. But it was real whether I was there or not. And he died asking for me. It was the first time in 31 years anyone heard Ferrari say those words aloud. Hours later, Ferrari died. Whether his last word was Dino, or whether he died in silence, accounts differ. Either way, after 31 years apart, they were together again. Today, the Dino name exists throughout Ferrari history. Most people know it as tribute, father honoring son. But those who studied Ferrari closely understood it differently. The tributes weren't celebration, they were conversation. One-sided conversation with someone who couldn't answer. Every engine called Dino was Ferrari saying, "You were right about this design." Every car called Dino was Ferrari saying, "You should have driven this." Every building called Dino was Ferrari saying, "You should have worked here." And underlying all of it, "I'm sorry I wasn't there." The Dino V6 engine still powers Ferraris today. Modified, evolved. But the core, Dino's design from those hospital blueprints, remains. Dino never drove a Ferrari, never saw the company grow, never lived to see his work succeed. But every Ferrari V6 carries his thinking, his approach, his fingerprints. Ferrari lost his son twice. Once to death, which he couldn't control, once to silence, which he chose, and spent 31 years trying to undo both by building monuments instead of speaking words. Because Ferrari understood engines, he understood metal and speed and competition, but he never understood how to say, "I'm sorry, I should have been there, I loved you, and losing you broke something in me I couldn't fix." So he said it the only way he knew how, by putting his son's name on everything, not as tribute, as apology, as conversation, as the words he couldn't speak carved into metal and machinery. Have you ever lost someone twice? Once to death, once to your inability to face it? Have you ever built monuments because you couldn't say words? This has been Enzo Ferrari, The Defining Silences. 10 episodes, 10 refusals, 10 moments when Ferrari chose absence over presence, and this final episode that explains them all. Ferrari didn't refuse to grieve. He couldn't, because grieving meant accepting powerlessness, and powerlessness meant admitting that love, even desperate, total, consuming love, sometimes isn't enough. So he chose silence, not because he didn't care, but because he cared so much he couldn't function if he acknowledged how little that caring could do. Every funeral he skipped, every letter he didn't open, every apology he couldn't accept, they all traced back to June 30th, 1957. The night silence became his language, and monuments became his words. Thank you for watching this series.